Well, we have become interdependent in ways that were intended to keep us from, it was the whole goal of creating these interdependencies. It's really hard to say. The whole goal of creating economic interdependence was to try to eliminate conflict and reduce the risk of people getting into armed conflicts, with countries getting into armed conflicts with one another. Unfortunately, that hasn't really turned out to be the case, and it hasn't gotten rid of armed conflicts, certainly in the world, and we continue to see countries both internally having armed conflict and with each other. And the war, Russia's war in Ukraine is a great example of why economic interdependence did not deter a country from attacking another country, or how it didn't do it. At the end of the day, countries, especially governments that are not accountable to their own people and aren't subjected to the restraints of democracy and the way that democratic countries hold back their governments from engaging in frivolous or offensive operations like the one that Russia has launched against Ukraine, that this challenge from authoritarian countries that are also have territorial ambitions and want and have aggressive tendencies is going to continue to plague us. And economic interdependence actually gives those tools, or gives those countries a tool that they can use as a weapon against democracies, because there is an asymmetry in the incentives between an authoritarian country and a democracy. We want to deter or prevent armed conflict, whereas these authoritarian countries see it as a useful tool to threaten and to as a legitimate way of accomplishing their political goals. So gray zone tactics tend to be those that are outside. They're not, it's not direct armed conflict where you're using your military to directly attack another state. But it's also outside of the normal bounds of what's considered state-to-state diplomatic relations. So usually they have some level of plausible deniability, or maybe not even very plausible, but at least there's one step removed from the government, and they can say that these are non-state actors that we don't have control over. So you see a lot of gray zone activity in cyberspace, where it's very hard to attribute something directly to a government, such as cyber harassment and campaigns that are promoting whether it's Russian or Chinese narratives that are being advanced by actors in cyberspace, and the Chinese and Russian governments can keep it's one step removed from the direct government. So that's a lot of the gray zone activity is there. Also in the South China Sea, you see some China engaging in gray zone activity by using their commercial fishing fleet. That is, it's technically these are fishing ships that are going out and engaging in illegal, unregulated, and unauthorized fishing in other countries' exclusive economic zones. And the Chinese government can say, well, those are private commercial shipping actors that are doing this. It's not the government, and you can't blame the government. They say you can't blame us, that these are just, individual ships, but really they are part of a overall strategy of occupying other countries' maritime domains and infringing on their maritime domains in the pursuit of establishing Chinese control and effective control over parts of the South China Sea that are not within that are within the exclusive economic zones of other countries. Well, I think that a lot of it is about transparency and about exposing these things and not being so, for instance, on cyber, we are often very wary. The United States historically and other countries have been very nervous about attributing cyber attacks to a state actor and making the direct connection between something that happened in cyberspace and saying that it was the act of a state. And I think that being more clear and making a stronger argument about what this means when countries are using cyberspace to carry out these kinds of operations and how damaging it is one thing when it comes to that kind of gray zone activity. In the South China Sea context, we are working with a lot of our partners. The United States is working with a lot of its partners in the South China Sea to increase their maritime domain awareness so that they have better capability to monitor what is happening in their own territorial waters and to be able to both identify and push out these gray zone actors like these fishing fleets and others who are operating in their waters, and making sure that they are able to do this by providing them with the kinds of equipment that they need, the kind of surveillance capability, what we call it, that they are able to know when there's been an incursion in their territory, in their exclusive economic zone or their territorial waters, to provide them with intelligence and information about that so that they can then go and respond to those incursions, and also providing them with training on how to address when other countries or when others violate their territorial integrity in this way. And then there's also the use of arbitral mechanisms and legal mechanisms, such as the court that administers the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the UNCLOS Arbitration Court, to try to get decisions against this kind of incursions. These are very difficult things to do, and a lot of times countries don't want to make these issues public with China because they fear retaliation from China. But by working together, the countries that are most vulnerable to these kinds of tactics have a better chance of overcoming them through cooperation and by agreeing to have kind of a shared set of responses that they have all agreed to take when their territorial waters are compromised. Corruption has a very corrosive effect in terms of public trust, especially in a democracy. And we've seen this, we see this in the United States too. Corruption is not just a phenomenon of developing countries or countries that are new democracies or authoritarian countries. Every developed democracy can point to recent corruption standards or scandals in their countries. In the case of most of the Western and developed democracies, these corruption cases are often first developed through the media oversight of powerful individuals and institutions, and doing investigations that lead to then the government having to charge somebody because of something that the media or civil society groups have uncovered. What we've been able to see develop in the past few years is that working together, civil society and media, can really do a lot to uncover corruption and call it out and address and identify it and publicly shame people who are involved in these activities. But you actually need the state, the government, to prosecute people, to make sure that they are not able to profit from the corruption, and that the government is also making it clear that this is not the way to operate itself. And so therefore, making sure that people get punished, making sure people who are in positions of public trust and abuse those through corruption schemes are removed from positions of public trust when they are accused or convicted of corruption. We're going through these challenges in the United States too. It is an endless process. I think that anytime you have people who are in a position of power that has economic consequences, which is, always, you will have corruption. As long as there are people who are making decisions about how resources are allocated, and how whether it's government or private money is being spent, you will have corruption, because there will always be a temptation to try to, on both the part of certain officials and on the part of those who are trying to get some benefit, to try to use corruption and bribery and to try to circumvent democratic systems. The key is we have this saying that sunshine is the best disinfectant. And so making sure that you have as much transparency around procurement processes and tenders. When the government is doing procurement and tenders, that all the documents should be made public, unless there's a legitimate national security reason not to do so. All contracts that the government enters into should be made public. All competitions should, all major decisions should be open to competitive bidding. And there needs to be, especially when it comes to government projects that can be subject to corruption, having legislative and other means of oversight to make sure that there's robust government oversight. But there's having civil society and journalists be free to look into and investigate these things is also very, very important. And I think that having citizens who themselves are empowered to, and who feel like they have a stake in government, and that government should be responsive to their needs, and that the worst thing that can happen in a society is for people to become used to corruption and decide that this is just the way it is and we can't do anything about it, and kind of give in to it, and then you really lose something in your society, and it becomes very difficult to get back from that. I know we've seen this in places around the world. I think that the role that media and civil society play in making sure that doesn't happen is really, really critical.